Reverend Lizzie, the BBUC pulpit is yours.
Good morning. Good wet, rainy solstice morning. So it's the season of honoring birth and rebirth in a time of darkness, and the weather's complying. It's a time to welcome the coming light, to honor the renewal of life, even in moments when all seems lost. And I think we've had those moments all too often recently. It's the time of year when holidays proclaim that hope is reborn, and I believe deeply that it's the time that we must honor the mother of hope in each and every one of us. So I ask myself, why is it? Why is this mother, this idea of mothering, gestation, a side event in these stories? Think about it. I think we need to dive really deeply in what it means to not simply give birth to hope, but what it means to conceive it. What does it mean to gestate it? What does it mean to nurture that spark that is hope within all of us? What does it mean to nurture it so that it grows? We need to celebrate the womb of healing, the creation where light comes from. Birth, spiritual birth, whole birth, live embodied birth. It's likened to hope. For it's the seed of possibility. Each new being born, regardless of gender or sex or affectional orientations, documentations, ethnicities, or species. Each new being born is a reminder of this. It's a reminder of the possibility in this world. Labor is dangerous, it's risky, it's painful. And yet, hope carries us through. Thomas Merton writes, perfect hope arrives on the brink of despair. Instead of falling over the edge, we find ourselves walking on air. That is what it means to be a mother of compassion, to see despair and give birth to hope. Some say the word compassion comes from compati, which is usually translated as suffering with the suffering of another, so that when you are compassionate, you are suffering with the suffering of someone else. Others say it is from cum passis, which means to love together with. Cum, together, passis, as in passion, together with, to love together with. Both for me work. I can suffer with you, and I can love together with you, and I can be compassionate. It's important, however, to note neither of these are sympathy. Neither of these are pity. The Hebrew word for mercy and compassion is rachamim. Rachamim, for mercy and compassion. It also means womb. And womb is where we get the word woman, not woe men. Womb. I do a contemplative practice called centering prayer. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. You use a word. It can be any word, usually a word that speaks to you of the holy, that calls you back into the sacred space, that calls you back into the divine, that connects you back to spirit. And this season, the word that's been really calling me is rachamim. Rachamim, mercy, compassion, womb. All over the northern hemisphere, people celebrate the solstice as the birth, the rebirth of the sun, in many ways and in many stories, going back before we were writing our stories down, before we were even writing them on caves, when we were looking up at the sun and the light and the dark. Christians in this season celebrate the birth, but not the pregnancy. Why not the gestating and the birthing of Jesus? Why not? These are questions I used to ask when I thought I was going to go through catechism correctly. Yeah. Why are we not overwhelmed with images of pregnant Marys during this season? Why don't we have statues that start appearing on December 1st on every lawn, like sails? Why? These holy winter days, why are we not surrounded by fertile Marys standing proudly pregnant during Advent, having said yes to the divine? The neo-pagan pageants of my childhood, the UUs, yes, they were big, lots of stuff, all filled with oak kings and holly kings. The oak king as the holly king wheel rotated, and then there was Christmas pageants, both in my UU Sunday school and in the school my day school, and they always had a Christmas pageant, and Mary was always played by the girl with the longest blonde hair, which was never me, but occasionally my best friend. And in my recollection, she never wore a pillow. Did any of yours ever wear a pillow? Now, times have changed. For any of you who was here last week to see the incredible Christmas pageant that was put on here, times have changed, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And then, of course, we have Santa. My mom loved Santa. In fact, she loved collecting Santa. Every year I unpack them and place them all around my house. It's part of my childhood story. We have Santas because I knew my childhood story was Santa could be anyone. Santa could be anyone, and there's a long story, and if you meet me, I will tell you that story at another time. But Santa really could be anyone. So we have little Asian Santas, we have little black Santas, we have little pink Santas, we have old men Santas, we have a purple Santa, we have a dog Santa, we have an angel Santa. But no female Santas. Not even a single Mrs. Claus. And what about her anyway? Mrs. Claus? It seems she appeared in 1851, just for you know, as the all-around cookie baker, elf tender, and possibly secretary. As seen in the book Lil's Travels of Santa Claus Land and Other Stories, which was published in 1878. Quote, there was a lady sitting by a golden desk writing in a large book, and Santa Claus was looking through a great telescope at every one, and every once in a while he'd stop and put his ear to a large speaking tube. Presently he said to the lady, put down a good mark for Sarah Buttermilk. I see she is trying to conquer her quick temper. Yep, the divine feminine apparently is never quick to anger, except she is. All too often we equate compassion with passivity, especially feminine compassion. But when we pay attention, compassion is anything but passive. It is active, actively listening with deep empathy and righteous anger at injustice and needless suffering, actively working for justice. How do we get this fat, jolly elf of judgment anyway? You're on a good list and you're on a bad list. You are worthy, you are not. Carol Wilde writes in an article on Ellen of the Ways, Ellen, E-L-E-N, is the oldest, if not the oldest, Neolithic horned goddess. Quote, it is well known now that Father Christmas story is based on the older non-Christian shamans of Lapland. Some of you probably already know this. Do I have some nodding heads? Yeah. The story goes that they aid their shamanic flights and trance. The shamans needed the properties of the fly agaric mushroom. This, of course, is the fabulous red and white toadstool of fairy stories, the ones our mothers warned us never to eat. Or as a friend of mine who's a shroomer says, you can eat anything, just some things you can only eat once. So, taking a mushroom can be risky, at least unpleasant because of the toxins it contains. The shamans noted that the reindeer ate mushrooms, which grew around silver birch trees, and they suffered no ill effects. The shaman let the substance pass through the reindeer, neutralizing the toxins, then drink its urine. Who thought of that? Maybe it was cold and it was warm. The active ingredients are unaffected, and the shaman enters his trance and begins his flight. Above the snow, he can see herds and see predators and gain helpful knowledge for the tribe. He gains wisdom of the plants and healing as the fly agaric opens gateways for him to be able to commune with the spirits of the land, the beasts, and the ancestors. He carries back gifts of healing and also news of the herds. When finished this trance session, the shaman would enter through the yurt, through the smoke hole, and slide down the central silver birch pole with his bag of healing plants and paraphernalia. Father Christmas coming down the chimney. So many of you already knew about the Father Christmas story, and you knew some of them. Hopefully you have a new little bit put into that, you know. But what you might not know is that the Nordic and Slavic shamans of old were all women. They were all women dressed in red with white fur. So why and when and how did the gender change of the driver of the sleigh? These are things we take for granted, that we owe questions. We're a questioning faith. When I was young, I was told I was Deer Clan, and I didn't want to be Deer Clan. Oh, I wanted to be Wolf Clan. I did not want to be Deer Clan, and I was very disappointed, and I asked them to check again, and they said, nope, you're a Deer Clan. And I'm like, are you sure, really passive prey animals, weak and meek? No, thank you. And I put it into that box of irrelevant traditions from dead people long ago. We all have those boxes, relevant traditions from dead people. We haul them out sometimes at holidays and go, no, not doing that. It should be noted that at 11 I was also adopted, and my new last name was Rudolph, like that famous reindeer that sold Christmas. And you haven't lived until your high school class sings, Rudolph's a very rude bram, Serby Ruber Snappy Dum, every time they see you in the hallway. And while I did love my new dad, and I secretly longed to belong to the reindeer games, I never really paid attention to what this mythology meant, or what it might meant to me, or what it was trying to tell me, until this winter. This winter I ran smack dab into the stories of Deer Woman and of the horned goddesses. This year I've been surrounded by deer everywhere I go, live, actual deer in all my travels, be it upstate New York or in Switzerland. They've got beautiful red deer. Clearly, whether you look at this through the lens of sacred story, Jung, mysticism, paganism, or good old-fashioned, well-reasoned Unitarian Universalism, something was up. I needed to start paying attention, and so I did. Female reindeer do not lose their antlers in the winter. They are far stronger than their male counterparts, and they are far more agile. They can leap and they can turn. They can redirect quickly to save the herd. Ancient sacred stories, not to mention pottery shards and statues, are full of deer women and full of antlered goddesses. They share our first personifications with the divine, with that of the queen bee. When we first wanted to create some kind of symbology for what was the divine here on this earth, we came up with the bee, the queen bee, and we came up with a deer. These sacred stories of cycles and renewal repeat over and over. Deer woman carries the world in her body, the sun in her antlers, but her antlers are also seen as trees of life. Her body being the earth, all life climbs out of her earthly womb when the waters break. That's how we are born. And these antlers dig deep into the land, upside down, so when you die, you can return back to the earth from which you come, and they are our roots. Over time, Deer Woman seems to have merged with various cow goddesses, becoming more agrarian, until we lost cow and deer entirely, and her calf became golden, and that's a different sermon. Really, why do we not have oodles of images of pregnant Marys? Why is Rudolph not Rudolphina? Why is there not greater outcry this season of sleighs that in the past decade alone, 80,000 reindeer in Siberia have lost their lives due to global warming? In this winter dream time, it is time to wake up to the dreams of our sacred nurturing history. We need to reclaim our stories because we need to reclaim our world. Some will tell you three wise men would have been more. Some will tell you if the three wise men had been women, and you all know this joke, because it's an old joke, they would have brought something more useful than frankincense and myrrh and gold. They would have brought casseroles, diaples, and beer. Why beer? Because it helps you let down your milk. My grandmother would say that over and over again. If they were really wise, they would have brought beer. But amid the humor is the unvarnished truth. It is the job of the sacred feminine to nurture with practical assistance, to be compassion in action. Compassion is brave. Perhaps every brave act we can ever label has been an act of compassion. Sully, landing a plane in the middle of the Hudson, did so because that was an act of compassion to save everybody on board. Compassion is the bravest act you can do, every single time. In Wild Mercy, living the fierce and tender wisdom of women mystics, Mirabai Starr writes of an experience she had at Chartres Cathedral in France. She was walking on the cathedral grounds in the rain, and she was overcome thinking about the distance that had developed between her and her stepdaughter. being mindful not to overstep boundaries, and any of us who have had those relationships where we love, but we don't know how to quite love, where we don't want to step into the space, we want them to hold their own space, so we withdraw. And a clear voice said, quote, I realized I didn't have to wait for Callie, that's her stepdaughter's name, approval of my plan, and her plan was to love and to listen. Nor did I require that she reciprocate my dedication to her. I could simply unlock the gates and get on with loving her as my daughter. End quote. I think we have been waiting for permission to love. I give you that permission now. You do not have to wait for permission to love. And that is, I believe, what we're called to do by the sacred feminine. We are called to be mothers of compassion. This is not an epiphany to shout out over rooftops or to put on Instagram. We are gently called to act. We are called to open our own mother hearts. Mothering and the actions of caring for all life as family are what has been lost when we have removed the sacred mother from our faiths and our holy days. Why? Well, perhaps the very incarnate aspect of the sacred holy feminine, and I used to hate that term. Every time it would come up, I'd go, ugh. It was like too pastel or too new agey or too like a sacred feminine. Meh. But it isn't. The sacred feminine is messy. It's the ugly cry. It's snot and all. It's the tender kiss. It's the brave guardian. Mirabai Starr puts it perfectly for me. Quote, the great mother herself, the feminine mystic, does not view creation as a damaged object in need of repair, but rather as a beloved child in need of care. I'm going to read that again. Like the great mother herself, the feminine mystic does not view creation as a damaged object in need of repair, but rather as a beloved child in need of care. Effective activism arises from unconditional love. We are not called to fight what we hate. We are called to save what we love. So even though I'm surrounded by tiny male Santas, I don't want to get rid of any of them. But I think I'm going to add some women Santas, and maybe some non-binary ones as well. And maybe next year, fair warning, David, there might be a Prager Mary in a sleigh lit up on the front porch, standing belly proud. Later on, we'll weave, like Miriam, baskets to save our baby brothers in. And their mothers, as their mothers, we can become wet nurses, nurturing our children and their secret identities in plain sight. As Chris said in the wonderful Christmas pageant last Sunday, every time we tell this Christmas story, it reminds us we must go out and work for liberation and justice. We, you and I, are the ones responsible for making the world a better place for all the babies that are born. Knowing all babies are holy, as are all beings, no matter how you identify, this solstice, this Yule, this Christmas, this Hanukkah, this Kwanzaa, I ask you to be Marys. I ask you, will you carry this baby? They will be the light the world needs right now. Yes? Will you carry the sacred truths of unconditional love in the darkness? Will you carry the sacred truths of unconditional love in the darkness? Yes? Will you persist in the fate of hate, loving those who hate you? Yes. This is what it means to be a mother of compassion. This is what we're called to do. It is hard work. It is essential right now. It means willing to sacrifice our own egos and status and personal well-being, but not our own health and not our self-care. Because if we don't have that, we cannot continue this work. And if you really cannot connect with being a mother because you think it's too gender identified, be a midwife. We must bring the fierce, brave, sacred feminine back into the season in every aspect because we need it in this world. We need to nurture compassion in all things. We need to conceive, carry, and give birth to love again and again. I will hold your hand if you will hold mine. Breathe. Push. Namaste.